You know what the media is saying? Marvel is back. It's the same narrative we have been hearing multiple news outlets and fans, audiences alike saying for almost every other MCU project that has come out after Endgame, right? But Thunderbolts seems to have done it. The new Avengers seem to have done it. You're listening to Elton Talks. I'm your host, Elton. And in this episode, we are going to be discussing about the Thunderbolts. Joining me today in this episode is Divith. Hi, Divith. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Elton. What's up?
All good, all good. I just watched Thunderbolts yesterday and I was thinking that, when we record this episode, it's going to be really funny because I know how we cross paths in college all the time. And we are like, did you watch the recent episode of Daredevil or did you watch Captain America 4? We're like, yeah, catching up. But I think Thunderbolts is the one movie that both of us kind of were eager to watch. What was your outlook when going to watch the Thunderbolts?
Okay, so I was really rooting for this movie to sort of be Marvel's movie of the year, project of the year, if I may say so. I had a lot of expectations from this because the marketing was so fresh compared to all the other projects that I've seen. And yes, the final outcome did prove my sort of expectation right that this movie does not follow a sort of fixed template, and it's good to see a new sort of Marvel movie.
True, true. I totally agree. As I said, excited because of the similar reasons to you. First of all, when they announced this project back, I don't know if it was D23 or one of the San Diego presentations, but when they announced the Thunderbolts, I was like, I do not think I want a Thunderbolts movie, but this team that they have put together seems really interesting, especially seeing
Uh-huh.
Ghost and Red Guardian along with Bucky and Yelena. I was like, damn, that's those are characters that I kind of like in different versions in different movies. To see them come together was kind of the highlight. And finally, like seeing this movie, as you rightly said, it was a very different kind of Marvel movie. And the marketing, yes, definitely. I mean, they had an A24 style trailer for this, which was really amazing to see the
Exactly.
talent that is worked behind. And also the most of the movie was shot on set. There's not much CGI if
Yeah.
I so that's another refreshing, change of pace and going back to the roots kind of a thing for Marvel. And speaking about going back to the roots, I when I watched this movie, I was like, damn, this is the kind of team up movie that was missing post Endgame. And when especially Red Guardian was acknowledging Winter Soldier's presence in the bike scene in the desert. And I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that Bucky had never met Red Guardian. For Red Guardian, Bucky is obviously this myth or legend of the Winter Soldier, right? But Bucky has never met Winter Soldier. Same goes with a lot of characters in this movie. But that was the moment when it hit me that, oh my God, this is like going back to Infinity War times when you used to see characters interacting with each other, like Chris Pratt's Star Lord interacting with Tony Stark, Iron Man. And those were the kind of interactions that kind of made the MCU what it was. If you even go back to the first Avengers, when all of the Avengers first met, I think it was Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man that fought with each other before even getting onto a team. So there's also that kind of energy that this movie brings, that they all are sent on this suicide mission, right, by Valentina Allegretti de Fontaine, as she likes to call herself. And it was really interesting to see all of those parallels that at least I could draw from the movie. And I was really excited for that to happen because even in the Marvels, one of the only teams we probably got in post Endgame era, and they just come together. There was no tension between the characters. There was no fight leading up to, forming and coming together as a team. So yeah, Thunderbolts in a lot of ways, I think, is going back to the roots, be it the production, be it the way the team comes together and how the team comes together. I really feel this is the kind of a team up movie we needed way, way earlier in phase four, or at least at the beginnings of phase five to set things right.
As you rightly said, the team up was very, it worked very well because of the friction which was introduced early in the movie. And yes, I do agree that it should have sort of come earlier into the phase five. An extension of my thoughts after watching the movie is I feel a lot of the elements from the movie were sort of just touched upon, where rather they could have dived deeper into them to sort of bring out another level of impact that would have elevated the movie, like, I think, tenfolds. No doubt it's a good movie, but it sort of underperformed my expectations. Maybe just a smidge.
What were the elements that you think that they could have done better?
Okay, so first things first, the sound design was sort of mid. The score I did not enjoy as much as the score I enjoyed from the marketing runs. So that was a bit of a letdown. Secondly, you have a character like Sentry,
Mm,
where the I know it's a movie which establishes him. You don't have to jump to his 100% potential right away. But the sort of intimidation I expected from this level of character, I don't think it met the right stage of intimidation which this character should have caused in us as an audience, be
yeah,
it his strength or, you know, even his counterpart, the Void,
yeah.
where we know the Void is ruthless. He has no he doesn't have a conscience. He doesn't have a construct around him. That just doesn't translate into into the movie.
I do agree. Like the trailers used a certain score in them, which was really unique in my opinion. And
Uh-huh.
I thought that was the official Thunderbolts score. But when I sit in the theater, I didn't even hear a single beat from that score. Marketing campaign, the trailers and teasers that they had better, scores to them. Whereas the movie kind of, like, I don't know, I cannot appreciate it. I cannot be like, why it didn't work for me. But yes, I must appreciate the revamped Avengers tune that comes in at the very end. It kind of feels
Yes.
like a placeholder team, but I was so happy to just hear the Avengers team and see that they are forming a new Avengers finally. I think that kind of put a smile on my face. And I turned to my friend who I'd gone with, and I was like, "Damn, that's the Avengers team. Can you hear the beats?" And she was like, "Yeah, I can hear it." And we were so happy. Talking about Sentry, yes. Why don't we jump into our point that we wanted to discuss about the powerhouse characters like Sentry? Sentry, I do agree. He was like in the movie, I think, at least my expectations, he did meet my expectations. The Void, I definitely agree. He was supposed to be ruthless, but it's a Disney Marvel movie. How could you, introduce that kind of a character? But also seeing that they speak about mental health and self-worth, I don't see how they could have not made Void a more intimidating character. That being said, how do you feel about Sentry being benched in his very first appearance? And by benched, I mean he cannot turn into the Sentry anymore, or at least he's scared to turn into the Sentry because of the fear of unleashing the Void. I think it's a pretty good
Uh-huh.
fail-safe they are built into the character, but
Uh-huh.
I also am very disappointed considering they did the same thing with Captain Marvel. They wrote her out of Endgame because she was so powerful. And Wanda, as we all know, very disappointing benching that's happened with her since Multiverse of Madness. So, how do you feel about Sentry being benched in his very first appearance?
I think if we consider the larger universe into perspective, this only ups the stake for Sentry because, we know that Thunderbolts ties into Doomsday.
Yeah,
So the circumstances then for Bob to turn into Sentry despite his fear of the void, the circumstances have to be up there. The stakes have to be that high. So I think it is a good trajectory they're following,
yeah.
only if the payoff is as great as it should be.
Like kind of a Thor arriving in Wakanda or
Or sort
uh,
of Thanos
mm,
kicking the Hulk's ass. That
yeah.
sort of fight. Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. I read those descriptions online. I was like, that sounds
Uh-huh.
great to me. Like, imagine he controls it the whole movie, and finally, when he lets the sentry out, he still gets beaten up, and that's how the stakes keep getting higher. Like the almost like the end of Infinity War. No matter how much you throw at a five-stone power Thanos, nothing is going to work. So yeah, that would
Exactly.
be a very good scene, and I do hope the Void gets to play at least a little bit in Doomsday and Secret Wars because the Void is just insane. All right, now having spoken about Sentry, let's move on to the actual characters who most of us, I believe, might have gone to see this movie, right? David, tell me, who was your favorite like character out of the ensemble cast that we had already met in previous movies, barring Sentry, because he's kind of a new. He
Yeah,
was introduced in this film. So, who was your favorite character otherwise in this movie? Who were you excited to see the most?
I think it's a close one between Red Guardian and Bucky, but I think I'd give it to Red Guardian because David Harbour is amazing as the character and he's so chaotic and so fun. He just brings out a sort of different flavor to the already intense sort of scene or environment that is being created. He, as a comic relief in both Black Widow and Thunderbolts, has been very effectively used. Whereas in other movies we see comedies mostly slapstick or borderline silly. I think David Harbour pulls off Red Guardian very well.
Mine was personally Yelena Belova, because I love Florence Pugh to the core. Of course, Red Guardian, David Harbour, seeing him from Stranger Things and now seeing him here, having loved him in Black Widow, the movie, it's like, yeah, I was really excited to see this character and he plays his role. Whereas Walker, I mean, he was good. He's decent. Ghost, really happy to see her, but she, I believe, was underutilized. And I feel that the MCU has a problem of underutilizing the Ant-Man franchise characters. Even when you get to see
Hmm.
Ant-Man, the Wasp, or Ghost, like for instance in Thunderbolts, when you get to see these characters again, in their movies, like Ant-Man and the Wasp gets an awesome, kitchen fight scene, and that looks so good. But we don't get a
Yeah.
single glimpse of a, use of powers during the Endgame battle. Of course, there's one moment where all the, I think it's Shuri, Pepper Potts, and Wasp should blast at Thanos to, help
Hmm.
Captain Marvel get to the Thanos. It's those small moments where those characters just get those, fleeting moments of action scenes.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ghost also. I felt like, yeah, she added a bit of flair to the only guns and knives fight, but it was still underutilized. So Yelena Belova stands out for me as, the one character that went above and beyond for me, at least. First of all, my love for Florence Pugh. She's, of
Hmm.
course, the replacement for Natasha Romanoff. And that, I think, that
Yeah,
bond that
she's a
she
fitting
shares.
replacement. I don't
Yeah,
think anyone could have done it better.
yeah. So a fitting replacement, and I think that connection to an original Avenger
Yeah.
is also very strong, right? Bucky is
Hmm.
an original, veteran of the MCU, but I would agree that his, role in the movie was kind of a different kind of a role. He's not that main leading
Yeah.
kind of a person. I heard reports that it was a Yelena-led movie, and they were trying to make it a and Yelena-led movie. And after seeing this, I don't know how successful they were, but if seeing that this is the Bucky-led movie that they were going to do, like the co-leading movie, I cannot imagine what it would have been without, Bucky in a leading kind of position. So that being said, even Bucky I feel was underutilized. We didn't get that
Yeah.
iconic Winter Soldier action. The desert action scene, good, but I mean we have had better, right? So all that being said, Yelena has definitely stood out as my favorite character, and the way Florence pulls off all the emotional scenes, the scene
Hmm.
where she said, I have much more, grief than anyone else, or
Yeah.
much many more moments. That scene was so beautiful. So yeah, Yelena overall my favorite character. But let's talk about the character that none of us have mentioned, Taskmaster. What did you think about that scene, and why do you think Taskmaster met her hand so soon at within being introduced, like what, not even 5 minutes on screen for this movie? What do you think about that?
Mhm. Okay, so firstly, I think we all saw it coming with her, or for the lack of better word, lack of appearance throughout promotions and the
Uh,
marketing runs.
Correction
It
there,
was
she did
pretty.
appear in the first trailers. She was digitally removed, apparently digitally
Uh-huh.
removed from the trailers. So, yeah.
Oh, drama. Well, yeah, we did see it coming, and her absence from the chairs, the Doomsday chairs, was also a hint at her untimely demise. The reason. I am not really sure. What do you think?
See, I personally felt it's a disrespect to the character itself, right? Because you introduce
Hmm.
a character with a certain background in comics, and no matter how her revelation turned out in the Black Widow movie, it served its purpose there. Not the Taskmaster
Yeah.
we wanted, and I'm not even aware of Taskmaster as a character apart from the fact that I know that he mimics people's powers, which in my opinion is a it doesn't like pique my interest. But that one bridge fight scene between Natasha and Taskmaster was one of the highlights of that movie. I really loved
Hmm.
how Taskmaster moved in that movie. Again, they used a male stunt double for a female character. It was so stupid, and they had to change all of that. They were met with a lot of backlash for this character, right? And I still do not see how you could kill a character within 5 minutes of their appearance and call it raising the stakes. Because the director, Jack Schreier, he says that we wanted the stakes to be, higher, and what better way than to kill off a character? My question is why Taskmaster and why so soon? It's just like I think there's some behind the scenes drama either with the actress or with the character. Something must have happened that they killed off the character so soon. Because the one brief second where her mask opens up, she says, "I'm not here for you," and her mask closes. I felt that was a pretty sick moment. I was like, "Damn, this she's here for business," and I was ready to see at least a few more scenes with her. But she just met her end, and I was like, "Damn, I didn't expect her to go that fast." As you said, it was very evident, but I was expecting her to tag on a little bit longer. We also have Valentina as our female antagonist, right, of this movie. And she's a
Yeah.
pretty well done antagonist, especially the fact that she doesn't meet her end in this movie, or she's
Hmm.
not technically defeated. She kind of has the win still, that she is able to come up and say that, yeah, I formed the new Avengers, which is a pretty big darn deal in this universe because what, for 6 to 8 years there were no Avengers, or in universe time, maybe how many years? A couple of years that there were no Avengers, right? And she gets to take credit for that and creating a superhuman like Sentry. And what do you think about legacy of Natasha? Did you think it was felt through this movie at all?
Again, it wasn't as clear as I'd like it to be because there wasn't a name drop, nor was there sort of an appearance in a flashback or even an iota of reference to Natasha in the movie. So I think that took away from Yelena's grief a bit. I think it would have been better if they addressed the lack of Natasha and the sort of impact had on Yelena and her life. If they just addressed that, I think Yelena's grief would have been translated a little bit better to the audience.
True, true. Uh, Again, talking about female characters, just realized that
Hmm.
their so-called mother, Melina, was totally absent from the conversation as well. Also, Zemo. What do you think about Zemo not being involved in a Thunderbolts movie? Because he's a pretty pivotal part of, the comics team forming. And of course, Thunderbolts comes from Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, which is, of
Yeah.
course, not the case here. A very fun way to, put that aside by having Red Guardian and, Yelena talk about that name. But Zemo, he's in the MCU. A lot of people love his character. He's one of the only
Hmm.
successful villains of, the Infinity Saga, having divided the Avengers as he promised to do. What do you think of him being excluded out of a movie whose name at least has ties to his character in the comics?
I mean, if Zemo would have been included in the movie, um, I think the end product wouldn't be as good as the one we've got right now because it was very clear what they were going for.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if they included a big baddie like Zemo into the picture, the whole dynamic shifts like complete 180 because we know what Zemo is capable of.
Yeah,
We
and
know
his
his
hatred
past
for
with Bucky.
superhumans as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But that would have kind of made for
So
a super fun dynamic, in my opinion. Like, a person
mhm,
who hates super soldiers having to work with them for whatever reason, because Sentry is the ultimate super soldier created now. And that
Mhm.
that would have been a fun, way to turn things around, I believe. But I get what you're saying, and Zemo has a troubled past as well. Like his family died
Yeah.
during Sokovia, so there's a lot they
Mhm.
could do to build the character's grief. But speaking from a self-worth aspect, I don't think they would have been able to build his character up in that aspect. So yeah,
Mhm.
I think the argument you make is well good, but again, Zemo not being in the Thunderbolts, where else is he going to show up? Kind of a question.
Yeah.
Anyways, Natasha's name not being taken reminds me of Steve's name being taken in the movie because they mentioned that you give Steve Rogers the serum, and there's a passing reference to his name at least, which made me think of
Mhm.
the legacy of the character of Steve Rogers, right? You have the recreation of the serum that ultimately leads to Sentry and has previously led to what's his name? Walker getting his powers,
John
Red
Walker.
Guardian, yeah,
Yeah.
John Walker, and even the Black Widow, the entire Black Widow program is spun out of, the recreation of the super soldier serum. So,
Mhm.
and eventually, hopefully, we get to see the origins of Logan, who is also the Weapon X. Having seen that this movie is about super soldiers, a lot to do with that super soldier serum that first created Steve Rogers, his name being dropped in this movie, and no other Avengers name being dropped. I sort of
Mhm.
feel that, Steve Rogers has created that impact, at least within the world of the MCU, that I felt his shadow looming over this movie. I was like, damn, Steve Rogers, that man. No one is able to, match up. And to say that while a Captain America exists in universe, Sam Wilson, and he
Mhm.
doesn't even show up in this movie, and they don't even bother to include a news clip of him in the post-credit scene. It's really hilarious. Did you feel the same thing in regards to, Steve Rogers' presence in the movie, or was it just, yeah, a name was dropped for you?
Well, it was much more than a name was dropped because ultimately Steve's legacy rests on the shoulders of the characters that are carrying it forward, like John Walker, Red Guardian, and Bucky.
Mainly Bucky and Sam, I would say.
Yeah. So yes, his involvement with the serum and the characters really made his sort of impact felt because even after the events of Endgame, we have multiple projects out and we still have to go back to the OG, the big shoes, uh, who I don't think anyone can fill.
True, true. I think we'll be discussing about Captain America sometime soon, so let's keep that discussion for then.
Yeah.
What did you think about the new Avengers, the title reveal, like, the asterisks finally revealed? Did it like live up to your expectations, disappoint you? Did you feel it was a marketing push? You just don't have any opinion. Yeah, you
Disappointing.
just what would you have liked the asterisks to be rather?
I was hoping Dark Avengers,
Yeah, same. I
but
was like
yeah.
telling my friend sitting next to me, like, you don't even know the Dark Avengers, but I wish it was the Dark Avengers. And guess what she said? She doesn't know anything about the comics. In fact, she was asking me who's Bob when I'd already explained
Oh,
it to her like few weeks ago that Sentry
uh-huh.
is Bob, is Void, and all of that. And she was like, oh, like, Dark Avengers seems cool. So, like, a normal general, not even a comics fan thinks that the name the Dark Avengers was cool because it fits with the group. I don't know why they had to go with the new Avengers. Personally, to
Yeah.
me, as soon as the name was revealed, I was like, oh, the new Avengers. But my entire theater was silent. No one even gasped. It was just
Yeah.
silent. Yeah, like, yeah, fine, whatever, kind of a thing. I'm really excited. I think, as we discussed, it opens up the possibility of the teams clashing, which Captain America is going to form a new Avengers team.
Mhm.
And this new Avengers team, made by the government and Val, of course, will be going up against them, which is a very fun dynamic. But even introducing, a concept like the new Avengers, when you have a Captain America who's already struggling in the MCU, representation wise, I feel was a very bad move on at least Marvel's part. Do you think it was
Yeah.
like part of a marketing push to, get the some version of the Avengers before Doomsday, or do you think it was always in the plans? Because the director says it was always in the plans.
I don't, even if it was a marketing push, I don't think it was a smart one because we never expected these characters to sort of take on the mantle of the Avengers.
True. But
So
don't you think that in
if
itself is
Jack,
a really good subversion of expectations that, Marvel is creating?
Mhm.
Because in the chair reveal breakdowns that I've seen, it goes like the
Mhm.
Avengers, Sam Wilson, Shang-Chi, Black Panther, Shuri, Ant-Man, and Thor. are the Avengers. Then you have the Thunderbolts, the Wakandans, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four. That's how they, categorize all these characters. So to even think that an underdog team like the Thunderbolts could reach out to the level of the Avengers, wasn't that the point of the Avengers in the first place? Don't you think that resonance may lead to this team, getting that sort of popularity like a Guardians of the Galaxy, the underdogs who everyone roots for by the third movie or so? Do you think that is a factor that could play into this new Avengers team, or do you think, nah, it's just like, not even worth the name?
I think it being associated with the name of the Avengers sort of takes away from its own legacy that it's trying to create. Because I don't think a team can be compared to the Avengers as such. Name being associated with Thunderbolts is sort of a special thing for them. I sort of agree with it, but again, I think it takes away from their individuality. I don't think any team can replace the legacy of the Avengers, especially after how the whole Infinity Saga played out.
So would you say that the type of characters they have assembled do not fit the mold of the Avengers as you would perceive it to be? Because what if, I think it's more or less confirmed in that way, that at least Captain America's team of Avengers would be Captain America himself, Walking Torres as Falcon, and you also have
Mhm.
Shang-Chi, Shuri as Black Panther, Thor, and Ant-Man. Do you think that is an Avengers worthy team that can replace or be a follow-up to the Avengers if not replace? Or do you think even they will not be able to live up to the Infinity Saga Avengers?
It's not so much as fitting a mold rather than not trying to fit in the mold anymore, because the Avengers, they got their closure, they're done. Now, with the multiverse saga sort of, coming to the end in 2 years down the line, I think newer teams will sort of enrich the character dynamics there are.
Well, yeah, I agree to that, but the Avengers as a brand is something Marvel cannot let go of, which is why I
Hmm.
think they decided to, make it the new Avengers. But
Yeah.
Thunderbolts, I think, with its marketing and at least with this first movie, has proven to be a good enough franchisee in its own right. So maybe,
Mhm.
the new Avengers, or even putting an asterisk at the end of it, because I don't think that played up much of the excitement for the movie because we all knew it was going to be something, right? We just didn't. In
Yeah.
fact, people are kind of disappointed, like you and me. We are almost kind of disappointed that they are called the New Avengers. Well, it creates exciting possibilities in a narrative sense that you will have like almost like a civil war between two Avengers teams happening. Doomsday neither
Mhm.
has the space nor the story bandwidth to do that storyline justice. So I think even
Yeah.
introducing that is
Exactly.
kind of womp womp. Let's talk about post-credit scene that people have been going gaga over. Apparently, it was shot 4 months ago by the Russo brothers, so I'm really happy to see that the Russos at least still have that touch in them for creating such, scenes that actually spark what 3 minutes of a post-credit scene, and people are like, everyone is excited about the future of the MCU again. So the Russos
I,
still,
did you notice the color palette of the post-credit scene
it was
was
a bit
very
different.
reminiscent of Endgame?
Was it? Oh, I
Yeah,
didn't notice that bit,
it
but
had a sort of orangish hue over the
yeah,
Avengers logo and the campus, the new building.
yes,
And it
yes.
was very different from the sort of grim and cold sort of color tone of the whole movie. And
Hmm.
I don't know, it kind of felt very Russo, yeah.
But that scene really worked for me with Bob being
Mhm.
in one corner of the room trying to read his book and all
Yeah.
of that. I think the team dynamics work there, and that kind of increases my faith in the Russos as much as I was one among the people who were like, bring back the Russos, what are we doing? Their flops outside of the MCU did cast a bit of doubt over whether they'll be able to do it. But I think with the scene, I'm like, yeah, they might still have it in them because when the interdimensional or whatever they're calling it portal opened and the
Hmm.
ship came through, I lost my mind. I was like, that's the Fantastic Four ship from the trailer. And then the ship just turns a slight bit and the Fantastic Four logo appears on screen. Now, fun fact, me and my friend are talking, the credits are rolling. We had that VT's mid credit scene, and
Hmm.
I see the Fantastic Four first steps. score being credited officially in
Yeah.
the credits
Uh-huh.
scroll.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
was
yeah,
like, what is this? Was there? And I turned to my friend who doesn't know jack shit about any of this. And I'm like, did you hear the Fantastic Four tune? Like, the trailer
yeah.
that played just before the movie. Did you hear the same tune play in the movie? And she's like, no, I don't think. And I'm like, why would they do that? And then the end credit scene pops up. It's the Fantastic Four. Well, first it felt a bit desperate that they would shoe in a scene like this, a 3 minute scene, that too longest the MCU has ever seen in a credit scene, and they would show
Mhm.
it in just weeks ahead, similarly to how they did the shawarma scene for Avengers 1, but that was totally different. This is setting up,
Mhm.
definitely building towards that,
Yeah,
collision course
yeah.
of all teams coming together. Fantastic
Mhm.
Four about to meet the new Avengers. Really exciting setup. Do you think this spoils the ending of Fantastic Four? Because after all of those exciting thoughts, desperate attempt, and oh, but it was done earlier, and this is like, really exciting for the MCU going forward, really sparked that interest for me in Avengers Doomsday and all of that. I sat back a moment and I was like, there is a scene in the trailer which shows an Earth exploding and a ship either going towards it or coming away from it. So, whatever that the context of that scene may be, many people assumed it is going to be a dream sequence. But seeing that same ship appear at the end of the Thunderbolts and definitely the Fantastic Four making contact with 616, what do
Mhm.
you think are the ramifications of this post-credit scene on a spoilery level for Fantastic Four: The First Steps? Do you think it's a spoiler at all?
I don't think it's a direct spoiler. It sort of nudges us into the direction of what the possible ending might be for F4, because we know the mightiest of possibilities lead to either Galactus sort of destroying their Earth or them sort of fleeing away from him. Yeah, so ultimate goal and the ultimate destination was 616, and here they are.
Yeah, and I'm so shocked that they would reveal it to us before the
Uh-huh.
movie came out in a post-credit scene of another movie. That's just the only thing that's shocking me. Because I can imagine whenever I go to watch it in the future, maybe, and I see a scene like this. Imagine the Thunderbolts or newly formed Avengers team that you just saw a few months ago appearing in a post-credit scene, and it kind of loops in there. That is like, the Thor Ragnarok approach, if you speak of it in that
Yeah.
way. But seeing that they kind of hinted at what was going to happen,
Mhm.
either at the end of the Fantastic Four, which we all think is what is going to happen. But what if it is something that happens maybe in the beginning of Doomsday and we do not know where they end up at the end of, um, their own movie and they interact with Doctor Doom and this is, somewhere down the line in Avengers Doomsday. That is also a possibility. But the very fact that they revealed that in a post-credit scene was very shocking to me. Uh,
But you never know. I mean, I'm still hoping they have a few more tricks up their sleeve and wouldn't
exactly.
ruin a potential $1 billion movie. But let's hope for the best.
Yeah, and guess what? I was speaking to another friend of mine who I'd gone to
Uh-huh.
watch Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame with. And
Mhm.
believe me, that was the time when the MCU was most alive. And I was recently speaking to him because we had gone to watch Ryan Coogler's movie Sinners, which stars
Uh-huh.
MCU actors Michael B. Jordan and Haley Steinfeld. But yeah, I was going to watch that movie just one day before the Thunderbolts. And I was just like, yeah, I'm seeing Thunderbolts tomorrow. Really exciting. Apparently, deals with mental health and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. He didn't even acknowledged the presence of that movie. And he was like, yeah, Fantastic Four is coming out in 2 months. And I was like, why would you watch Fantastic Four and not the Thunderbolts? And he said, it's just the nostalgia factor for it. We have had two versions of the Fantastic Four. Most of us have grown
Yeah.
up with those versions. So
Mhm.
it's really exciting to see what I at least can see from the marketing campaign, a really good version, a really well thought out version of the team. For example, that one
Mhm.
moment of Reed Richards stretching, which
Yeah.
appears to me to be the whatever nullifier that brings down Galactus in the comics.
Mhm. Yeah.
Really interesting shot. So, really excited for where things could lead. Final thoughts on the post credits being again set 14 months after the reveal of the new Avengers. Do you think again it's missed opportunity like we were discussing earlier on that they're bringing all this in at a very very last moment and it makes you feel that just things are too rushed at this point. As much as you're getting excited, you're also feeling the loss of great content when you get great content like the ending of Daredevil Born Again or the ending of the Thunderbolts itself, being, rushed to reach Avengers Doomsday without playing out the full possibility of the individual stories.
It does feel a tad bit rushed given the sort of possibilities there were. But again, schedule is pretty tight for the current slate of Marvel movies,
True,
with
true.
Fantastic Four being the last project this year,
And the
Doomsday
first
being
of
the,
phase six, to mention that.
yeah, I mean, the stakes are pretty high for them and they are pretty tight on time. So I don't think they could have done anything better for the post-credit scene here.
But I think it's also reflecting in the box office, whereas, audiences are seeming to love it. Even the Rotten Tomato score is
Yeah.
around
Uh-huh.
88%, which is not at all bad in my opinion. And there's
Mhm.
also an A minus cinema score, which is all US metrics, but still we usually, measure up these movies based on that. Seeing all these
Uh-huh.
positive things around Thunderbolts and seeing that it's underperforming at an MCU standard, given that it's kind of met its budget, just met its budget on its opening weekend, is still an alarm to me. Like, how is all of this going to play out? But I think they put their trust in the right team. Thunderbolts was at least exciting, and we are here discussing it for what, approximately 2 hours now, I think. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think at least it sparked that interest, and I'm seeing a revival, or at least I've heard of the revival of Avengers team memes for the Thunderbolts team, which is really exciting for, this newly formed team. I even recommended it to one of my other friends, like, long back we used to talk about these movies, and all of these people who I'm talking about right now have stopped watching MCU content. And he asked me, how was this movie? And I said, yeah, it's fun and all that. And he went to see it that very evening. So I'm sure, like, the MCU is back on track to at least
Yeah.
make it to Avengers Doomsday with this movie. But I think it's left to be seen with this box office performance, like, what is going to happen to even a franchise, like a $2 billion franchise like the Avengers franchise, right? So, any closing thoughts on the movie as a whole?
Okay, so closing thoughts. Movie was fresh, new, great. Execution could have been a tad bit better. Expectations for the Thunderbolts in Doomsday is I just hope they're not used as side or just sidelined throughout the movie, where I just hope a few characters are given their moment to shine. Elena sort of filling the shoes of Natasha, or Bucky having his moment with Sam as Cap. Yeah, I just hope they're not used as fluff pieces in the movie. Yeah, that's my biggest fear of so many characters being crammed up into a sort of 2.5 hour, 3 hour movie.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. As you said, this movie felt fresh. It felt like Marvel after a long time, as I've also said before. And yeah, the makings of a team, as Red Guardian says, it has the makings of a team and a team that
Yes.
would improve over time, which is the biggest tell factor that this might have a chance of working, like the Guardians or the Avengers. So yeah,
Mhm.
given all that, possibilities for the Thunderbolts endless. And even I would like to see Yelena done justice. Bucky, if he meets his end, because I really do not know what else he could do if they're not even able to make Winter Soldier level action scenes with him anymore. What is his purpose in the MCU? If Bucky meets his end, I hope he goes out on a high with Steve Rogers, Old Man, or Captain Hydra, whichever variant it may be, by his side.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I hope we get to see Sentry and a tad bit of the Void included, going up against Doom. Yeah, and I'm really excited to
I
see
just
how
hope
this.
Sentry makes it to Battle World because that'd be
However,
something to watch. Yeah.
yes, definitely. I just do not want him to be sidelined like Captain
Uh-huh.
Marvel in Endgame. And as you said, these characters are very suicidal, as some people are saying, suicidal squad, they're calling them online. I just hope they
Uh-huh.
do not end up to be the suicide squad of Avengers Doomsday. Like, the
Mhm.
government sends out a team of Avengers to just die, knowing that they are going to die, which would be, yeah, kind of suicide squad. But I hope they do not treat them like that in that movie, considering how audiences are reacting to this team now. With one more project to close out phase five, which is Iron Art, which we have not seen any promotional material yet for, and Fantastic Four, which
Mhm.
looks pretty decent, really good in my opinion. We are hoping to close out our road to Avengers Doomsday with a pretty decent, lead up to the movie. So I hope that continues, and I'd like to thank you, Divith, for joining me on this almost 2.5 hours discussion of Thunderbolts, because it's always fun, to talk about this stuff, especially when there's a waning interest in the franchise. It's great to be able to discuss the smallest of projects with the biggest of fans. So thank you so much
Yes,
for joining me on this episode, and I hope we speak more on our other, ideated topics like Daredevil, Born Again, Captain America, Brave New World, the Doomsday chairs, which everyone has spoken about already. But I hope we get to, talk about that in a future episode. So thank you so much again for joining, and we'll call it a close here. Thank you everyone for listening, my non-existent listeners, but I hope this finds some audience somewhere. And we'll see you in the next episode. Until then, love you 3000.